Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 48 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail in Week 9 and the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. We're recording our Thursday episode a little bit early. We're recording it on Tuesday instead of Wednesday, so we don't have a ton of injury news to discuss with you. We don't have the Wednesday practice report, so check in with us on tomorrow on Friday show for the biggest injuries leading into your Week 9 games. However, we do still have a lot of news to talk about from the trade deadline, and we do have a Thursday night football preview. So Nick, what are your just thoughts about the trade deadline and the moves that were made or not made before getting into the ones that we're going to talk about?
Usually every year you hear a lot of rumors and not a lot happens. I have to say I was actually fairly surprised with how many people were traded, especially fantasy relevant players. I think some teams made some very good moves. I think some teams made some very bad moves. I think there's a couple guys in here that have the chance to be, I don't want to say league winners, but a lot more fantasy relevant now. And a lot of guys took a bad bet. Some guys added some players to their team, which are definitely going to plummet their stock. So definitely an interesting trade deadline, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much. This is our Thursday show. We do 4 shows a week on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and a live show on Sundays. For our Thursday show, we'll talk about the news of the week, whether it's news of the day or news, injuries, etc. And then a Thursday night football preview. It's probably our shortest show of the week. That's okay. It's really to update you on any news and prepare you for the Thursday night game. Then we have our Friday show tomorrow, which is our biggest show of the week. All boom, all bust teams, flex on them. So all the flex players that you may want to start, and a lot of fun stuff with that. Then next is our Sunday show. It's going to be live Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, like it is every single week. Available on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. YouTube and Facebook is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Twitter is PrimeTimeFFPod. We go for about an hour and a half, depending on our schedules, and we answer all of your fantasy questions. Our goal is to answer all of your questions. Don't want to leave them unanswered. I want to make sure that you guys are taken care of. If you're listening, a first-time listener, thank you so much. If you're listening on an audio streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, or Google Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating and a review if you're on Apple or Spotify. If you want to listen and watch the show, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you're watching this video, drop a like on it. We'd appreciate that. Hit that subscribe button, hit notifications, keep connecting with us. Follow us on all our social media channels, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, PrimeTimeFFPod, and then Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. So the news of the day is just trade deadline news. So let's talk about it. First off, the day kicked off with the Lions trading TJ Hockenson to the Vikings. Irv Smith is also going to be sidelined for 8 to 10 weeks with a high ankle sprain. So Irv Smith is probably not going to play another game for your fantasy team this season. Nick, what are your thoughts about this TJ Hockenson trade? I don't think he's on a lot of waiver wire. So if you have Hockenson, are you happy or are you a little upset about this?
So he was a very big boom bust guy. He's someone I've been a lot lower on. But, for people that are saying like, oh, the Vikings, like good offense, great role, like going to have a lot of upside for touchdowns. Well, Adam Thielen's had double-digit touchdowns for, I think, 2 of the last 3 seasons. I think the one he did, and he had 8, or he was hurt for the majority of the year. Like the Lions offense outside of 1 or 2 weeks was averaging the most points in football. So they were already scoring a lot. He was the wide receiver, or probably the second or third receiving option on his team. Now he gets bounced by Jefferson and Dalvin Cook, who will take the primary workload there. You'll see Thielen in there as well. KJ Osborne's going to grab some of those catches as well, and Jalen Reagor, who they just brought in. So, it's a good it's a good team. It's good for football, but I don't feel any better about TJ Hockenson after the trade than I did before. I think he's pretty much at the same value where, touchdown upside, he's going to catch some balls, going to get some good targets, but I don't know if he's going to sustain it for the year. I'm not actively trying to trade for him, and I'm also not actively trading him away.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it also helps guys like DeAndre Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown who are going to catch balls over there in Detroit, but I think it also hurts Jared Goff, who can't spread the ball around as much anymore. Next trade of the day. Chase Claypool was traded to the Bears for a 2nd-round pick. Your thoughts on this one?
Claypool definitely gets a downgrade in my eye. The Bears have looked better in the past couple weeks, but we know what that team is. We know that they're not the best. Chase Claypool lets his ego get in the way a lot, and I'm a Claypool fan. Like, he has a massive ego. And Mike Tomlin, we know, has historically kind of kept the egos in check in that building. You know, we see we've seen Antonio Brown saga, we've seen Le'Veon Bell, even James Washington, like a lower level receiver. Like, we see once they leave, like, the ego kind of gets inflated, like things kind of blow up. So as talented as Claypool is, I did not like this move from a fantasy perspective for him. I do think George Pickens and Deontay Johnson definitely have more upside now. Claypool was only playing in the slot, so I assume one of those two will move over there. Deontay was notorious for being in the slot for the past couple of years. They moved him to the outside this year to put Claypool on the inside. So I like Deontay Johnson. I'm not a big fan of Claypool, and Darnell Mooney was the wide receiver one over there. He definitely gets a downgrade because there's only so many throws that they're going to have, even no matter what the game script is, and they're going to be spread around. So
well, maybe this opens up the playbook a little bit for Justin Fields, gives him another weapon.
Yeah, I think Fields would honestly get the biggest upgrade. I think over the last 4 weeks, he's had 19 plus points in each of those games. So he's been pretty good for the last few weeks for fantasy for sure. So this will definitely help out.
My thing with Fields is I don't think he looks great at all. I don't think he's looked good through 2 years, but like, he's had the worst offensive line in football, and he hasn't had a stud receiver either. Look at guys like Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Tua. They didn't really look good until they got an elite receiver on their team. And I know you can't just say, I'm going to get an elite receiver. That's not how this works. But, you know, if the Bears do believe this guy a little bit, you know, I think they got to draft somebody with whatever draft pick they have. I think they got to take a receiver and go all in, or they also got to fix the offensive line too. So it's a crappy situation, but, you know, he's in a really tough situation. He's got really nothing going for him, so it is tough. The big trade of the day, I think, was for Bradley Chubb going to the Dolphins. That's not a fantasy thing, though. I wouldn't really talk fantasy Bradley Chubb. However, Chase Edmonds was traded to the Broncos, so there goes the handcuff for Mostert. Another one came back. We'll talk about that in a second. But that Denver backfield, man, I don't know if you could trust starting any of them any week. Latavius Murray seemed like the goal line back, and I don't think Latavius Murray has looked bad. They loved Melvin Gordon for parts of this season, and now they get Chase Edmonds. So I just don't know what they're doing over there, but I wouldn't feel comfortable playing any Denver back on a weekend and week out basis. This is a situation if you have to play one due to a bye week or anything, but it's messy over there.
No, absolutely. And the worst part is, like, you kind of have to roster all of them because there's any single week where one of them could take over as the lead back over there. Like, we saw Javonte go down. We clearly thought Melvin Gordon was going to be a great handcuff back, and that didn't pan out. They picked up Latavius Murray, instantly plugged him into that offense, and now they don't like the running game, and they pick up Chase Edmonds, who's a receiving back. So, like, I don't know how you could trust any of them, but I still think all of them are rosterable. It's kind of like the Washington football team situation where it's like J.D. McKissick might be probable now, but the other two backs over there you have to put on your team just because they're going to get some level of workload, but you're still not going to be comfortable playing them. So it's a messy situation, but we'll see how the rest of the season unfolds. I'm surprised they didn't move Melvin Gordon before the deadline.
The Falcons traded Calvin Ridley to the Jaguars. I don't believe he could play until 2023, so it's really not much to talk about for this season, but it is. I mean, they didn't trade a lot from it, the conditional pick, but it does, you know, send an alert to me that they aren't 100% confident in their wide receiver room. It is also funny that Calvin really bet on the Falcons to beat the Jaguars, and that's what got him in trouble. So it's ironic. Jeff Wilson was traded to the Dolphins for a 5th-round pick. I'm pretty sure I predicted this on Tuesday's show, or you did. I think I did, yeah. So Mike McDaniel gets a running back that he's comfortable with. He has now 2 San Francisco 49ers former running backs on his team. I like to trade for the Dolphins. I don't think Jeff Wilson cuts into Mostert's work a lot because Mostert looked good. But if Mostert goes down, that's a guy you want. I think Jeff Wilson is more rosterable now than he was a day ago.
I would go trade for Jeff Wilson where you can. Elijah Moore is going to come off the IR soon. He's going to be the locked-in handcuff for CMC, and Jeff Wilson's going to be the locked-in handcuff to Raheem Mostert, who has one of the biggest injury. Like CMC and Raheem Mostert, they have 2 of the most extensive injury history in the NFL at the running back position, and both those offenses are electric. Both of them run the ball extremely well, so. I mean, I think Jeff Wilson has a very good a good ceiling over there. I think you can go trade for him pretty low as well.
All right. And lastly, Naheem Hines and a 5th-round pick were traded to the Bills for Zach Moss and a 6th-round pick after Nick tried to trade me Devin Singletary this morning. I did not want any part of that trade.
I was trying so desperately to trade Singletary in the league before the deadline, and no one bit.
No. So what do you think of this offer? I mean, to me, I don't think Hines is any better or worse than Singletary, honestly. So I think it just makes the Buffalo situation messy, and I think it actually helps Jonathan Taylor because Hines looked pretty good. I know I forget the other backup's name. I know he looked good in the 2 weeks.
Deion Jackson.
Yeah, I know Deion Jackson looked good, but to me, it just shows that they're still confident in Jonathan Taylor, and that's just not changing anytime soon.
Well, now I think Deion Jackson has to be rostered just like Naeem Hines is, and I think Hines has to be rostered. He's probably we did have him on the waiver wire segment. We had him as,
but they can't all be rostered. Like how many of these guys should be rostered? Because I don't think Hines is rosterable now. I mean they have Singletary and
he has the potential to be the RB1 on the number 1 offense in football, right? It's like why we picked up Isaiah Pacheco, even though since Kareem Hunt they haven't had a stable running game in Kansas City.
Well,
you just know
that clearly was a mistake to pick up Pacheco. That was a mistake. Me picking Pacheco cost me Dante Foreman in 3 months.
And people thought Dante Foreman wasn't going to be the move, and then all of a sudden, over the last 2 weeks, he's the RB1 in fantasy. So, like, you never know with the running backs and who gets the opportunity, what they do with it. Like, Hines has been pretty good for football, and like I said, he's outscored Taylor 3 times this season on the same team. I think he's worth the roster spot. I think for me, he goes up in my waiver order.
So you'd rather have him now that he's on Buffalo than on the Colts?
Yes, absolutely.
I would not. Yeah, he actually
with Deion Jackson and Hines. Deion Jackson was out snapping Hines. Hines has a chance here to go, maybe not out snap Singletary, but to be fantasy relevant. It's kind of like when Zach Moss over there was still averaging 10, 12 points per game. I think it was last year or 2 years ago, and Singletary was still out snapping him. So I do think
don't they have another running back though? They have what's his name?
They have James Cook, who's down.
Yeah, they're the rookie over there. Then they may not love him, but I don't know. To me, it's just you're into a messier committee situation. To me, I don't know. I don't want to touch a Buffalo running back unless I know that they're elite, and I think it's worse. Honestly, that's my opinion though. All right, moving on to our Thursday Night Football preview. Eagles at the Texans. Every week we try to give you like an even number of players from each side of the team. We can't. Like I tried. I tried. All right. The Eagles. Let's start with Jalen Hurts, 24.1.
Over. Who on the Texans is going to stop him? Who?
The only thing that I think stops Jalen Hurts from having this number is if Miles Sanders has like 4 touchdowns and they pull Hurts in like the third quarter, which
that has potential to happen. I will give you that.
It does. So I'm actually going to say under. I'm going to say right at like 20-22, not because he doesn't play well, because this game is a blowout by the third quarter.
Fair enough.
What about AJ Brown at 17.8?
I'm going to go under. He only had 6 catches last week in the 3 touchdown game. Derek Stingley's going to be guarding him, which I'm not saying you can hang with AJ Brown, but I do think Devontae Smith has the higher upside, the more workload this week in this matchup. So I'm going to go under, but not because he's going to get shut down. I think he's going to be closer to like that 14-15 mark.
Yeah, I'm slightly under right at 16. How about Devontae Smith at 12.9? I'm going to say over because last week was AJ Brown's game, and I think this time it's Devontae Smith's game. They want to keep him involved.
Pretty much, I think he'll outscore AJ Brown mildly on the week. So I'll go
Miles Sanders, 13.5.
Probably going over. I'd be surprised if he didn't.
Yeah, he has to go over. Dallas Goedert at 10.8.
Over as well. There's going to be so much touchdown upside for him.
I think if he scores a touchdown, he goes over, but I think if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's right at like 9 or 10.
Yeah.
On to the Texans. Again, I tried. Davis Mills, 11.2. Under.
I'm going to go over because the game script's going to call for him to pass the ball 50 to 60 times.
Kirk Cousins only had 9 against them. Under. It's just under. Brandon Cooks at 11.4. I actually think he could go over in this one. He didn't get traded with the trade deadline. I could see them getting more involved. I'll go with over at like 12.
I'm going to go under. Darius Slay, I still don't want any part of that matchup.
And lastly, Dameon Pierce at 17.2. This number is too high for me.
I agree. Last week we got the reality check that it's touchdown. It's not touchdown or bust, but like he's going to need the touchdowns because he still is the running back for the Texans and won't have the positive game script. With the late touchdown that bailed him out, he only finished at 14. So I think the same thing could happen this week with no touchdown. He has a chance to be sub 10. So.
Yep, I totally agree. Alrighty, guys, that was our show for Thursday Night Football and the trade deadline recap. It's a short show on Thursdays, but that's okay because our longest show is on Fridays, and that's coming up tomorrow. All boom, all bust teams. Flex on them. Injury news to get you prepared for the weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify, however you're listening. If you're on YouTube, please drop a like on this video. Hit subscribe to the channel. Hit the little notification dingy so you get a notification every time we upload a video. Keep following us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, PrimeTimeFFPod, then Facebook and YouTube. Primetime Fantasy Podcast. We are 2 subscribers away from 100 on YouTube. We'd appreciate getting to that number before the Sunday live show. Thank you guys for listening to this one. Enjoy your Thursday Night Football tonight.